The psychology of the second language. The psychology of second language acquisition offers a systematic and accessible overview of the main psychological areas and theories in order to keep abreast of the ongoing paradigm shift. The basic premise underlining a social psychological perspective of second language acquisition is that language is a defining characteristic of the individual. It is involved in one's thought, self communication, social interaction, and perception of the world. Languages and the brain. Research has identified two primary language centers, which are both located on the left side of the brain. These are Broca's area, tasked with directing the process that lead to speech utterance, and Wernicke's area, whose main role is to decode speech. Paul Pierre Broca observed that an area in the left frontal lobe, or Broca's area, appeared to be responsible for the ability to speak, and noted that an injury to the left side of the brain was much more likely to result in language loss than was an injury to the right side. Paul Pierre Broca, a neuroscience, made the most important discovery about the anatomy of the brain. He found its speech center, now called Broca's area. Lindbergh proposed the children had only a limited number of years during which they could acquire their L1 flawlessly if they suffered brain damage. To the language areas, brain plasticity in childhood would allow other areas of the brain to take over the language function of the damaged areas. But beyond a certain age, normal language would not be possible. This is the critical period hypothesis mentioned in Chapter 2 and to be discussed below in relation to the influence of age on SLA. What is the specialization of the left hemisphere? In general, the left hemisphere is specialized for processing language and producing speech, carrying out sequential processing of information, focusing attention, and inhibiting negative emotions. These are the following that indicated in here: the phonology, morphology, syntax, function, words and inflections, tones, system, much lexical and knowledge. What is the specialization of the right hemisphere? In humans, speech perception is lateralized with the left hemisphere of the brain dominant in processing the communicative content and the right hemisphere dominant in processing the emotional content, nonverbal, as babies cries, visuospatial information, intonation, non-literal meaning, and ambiguity, many pragmatic abilities, some lexical knowledge. The left hemisphere is dominant for the processing positive emotion, whereas the right hemisphere is dominant for the processing negative emotion. According to the balance hypothesis, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness are considered negative emotions, and happiness and surprise are classified as positive emotions. Specific questions which have been explored are listed below, along with a brief summary of results from some of the research conducted on them. 1. How independent are the languages of multilingual speakers? There is no single answer to this question, both because there appears to be considerable individual variation among speakers and because there are very complex factors which must be taken into an account. It seems reasonable to conclude, however, that multiple language systems are neither completely separate nor completely fused. How are multiple language structures organized in relation to one another in the brain? Are both languages stored in the same areas? Again, there is considerable variation among speakers. For at least some multilinguals, it appears that L1 and L2 are stored in somewhat different areas of the brain, but both are predominantly in or probably overlapping. Areas of the left hemisphere, however, the right hemisphere might be more involved in L2 than in L1. Thus, organization of the brain for L2 in relation to L1 differ with age of acquisition. How it is learned or level of proficiency? The answer is probably yes. to all three with the strongest body of evidence showing that age of acquisition influences brain organization for many second language learners. Do two or more languages show the some sort of loss disruption after brain damage? When there is differential impairment of recovery, which language recovers first? As noticed in the first part of this section, brain damage results in the same or very similar patterns of loss and recovery for both all of those multilingual persons, languages, but many exceptions have been reported. One early hypothesis was that in cases of such brain damage, the last learned language would be the first lost, the next to the last learned second to the loss of sort. With L1, the last to remain recovery, was speculated to be L1 first. This is the fact does not appear to occur at the level greater than a chance, at least with respect to order of recovery.
Good morning. And learning processes. Psychology provides us with two major framework for focus on learning process: information processing or IP, and connection IP has had more influence on the study of SLAN and other psychological perspective, following an approach developed by John Anderson. Information processing (IPS) approaches based on IP are concerned with the mental processes involved in language learning and use. This includes perception and the input of new information, the information organization and regulation of internal mental presentations. And the table and output strategies, the information processing approach makes a number of assumptions. One, second language learning is a question of the complex cognitive skills and the respect language learning, like the acquisition of other complex skills. Number two, complex skills can be reduced to sets of simpler component skills which are organized. Lower order component skills are the learning of higher order skills. Number three, learning of skills initially demands learner attention and thus involves controlled processing. Number four, controlled processing require considerate mental space of attentional effort. Number five, human are limited capacity processors they can attend and limited numbers of control processing demands F1 time. 6. Learning to go from control automatic processing with practice automatic processing requires less mental space and attentional effort. And 7. Learning essentially involves development from controlled and automatic processing and component skills building learners controlled processes and capacity of new information high older skills. Our capacity requirements for controlled processing are obvious when we beginning to learn second language as well to connected our attention to comprehend to our procedure. Basic vocabulary, syntactic structures, it is only after it been optimized, optimized, optimized that we can attend more complex, higher order features and content. So, thank you.
Good day, Ma'am Asoy. I'm Desiree P. Kagat-Kagat from BSED 2, Section 2. My topic is all about differences in learners. The differences we explore here are age, sex, aptitude, motivation, cognitive style, personality, and learning strategies. Age. It is a common belief that children are more successful alto learners than adults. Age differences and SLA. Younger advantage. Brain plasticity, not analytical. Fewer inhibitations. Weaker group identity. Simplified input more likely. Older advantages. Learning capacity, analytic ability, pragmatic skills, greater knowledge of L1, real-world knowledge. Sex. There is widespread belief in many Western cultures that females tend to be better alto learners than males, but this belief is probably primarily a social construct based on outcomes which reflect cultural and socio-psychological constraints and influences. Aptitude. The assumption that there is a talent which is specific to language learning has been widely held for many years. The following four components were proposed by Corral 1965 as underlying this talent, and they constitute the basis for most aptitude tests. First is phonemic calling ability, inductive language learning ability, grammatical sensitivity, and associative memory capacity. Motivation. Largely determine the level of effort which learners expend at various stages in their alto development, often a key to ultimate level of proficiency. Cognitive style. Cognitive styles refers to individuals' preferred way of processing, of perceiving, conceptualizing, organizing, and relaying information. Personality. Personality facts are sometimes added to cognitive style in characterizing more general styles. Personality traits. Anxious, self-confident, risk-avoiding, risk-taking, shy, adventuresome, introverted, extroverted, inner-directed, other-directed, reflective, impulsive, imaginative, unique receptive, creative, uncreative, empathetic, and sensitive to others, tolerant of ambiguity, closure-oriented. Thank you.
Learning strategies. A typology of language learning strategies which is widely used in SLA was formulated by Umalai and Chamot, 1987. Metacognitive. Reviewing a concept or principles in anticipation of a learning activity, deciding in advance to attend the specific aspect of input. Rehearsing linguistic components which will be required for an upcoming language test. Self-monitoring of progress and knowledge states. Cognitive. Repeating after a language model, translating from L1, remembering a new word in L2 by relating into one that sounds the same in L1, or by creating vivid image guessing meaning of new materials through referencing. Social affective. Seeking opportunities to interact with native speakers, working cooperatively with peers to obtain feedback or poll information. Asking questions to obtain clarification, requesting repetition, explanation, or examples.
Our topic is the effect of multilingualism, which is the positive versus negative. The notion that multilingualism has positive effects on cognitive development was traditionally related to the belief that foreign language, especially Greek and Latin, is good for training the mind There is still an assumption in many parts of the world that multilingualism is an essential characteristic of educated and cultured members of society. And the opposite nation that multilingualism has a negative impact on general intelligence, perhaps react its zenith in US-based research on immigrants during the 1930s, motivated by increasingly xenophobic isolationist politics system at the time, and based on the low scores of immigrants who spoke language other than English natively on the standardized test of intelligence which then were coming into widespread use. Thank you.